Joining me now from the OANN newsroom, Executive Vice President of Citizens for Self-Governance, Mike Ruthenberg. Mike, you know, if on November 9th we wake up and find out there is a Clinton presidency 2.0, we have to remind the American people that all is not lost. We have the founding document, and we have Article 5 that is our recourse, our ability to hold what would be probably the next rogue president in the Oval Office in check.
Graham, you have underscored exactly why Article 5 is the answer. However, we are already in the middle of a constitutional crisis. Think about this. If somebody lets her off, apparently there's a lot of people, and Ms. Clinton said it herself, a lot of people have let her off or are holding her culpable to a lot of the things that are going on. Whichever way you believe, there is still a lot of justice to be had there. And if she is found to have done something wrong before she's elected, then you have a crisis if she should be pardoned or somehow released under the Constitution. And there's some ambiguity under the Constitution as to what happens if she becomes president. Can she pardon herself? So we really need an Article 5 convention in order to be able to get rid of some of the loopholes. Who would have ever thought that we would have this kind of a situation coming in? And it is time that we use Article 5, the only answer in the Constitution, for us to be able to fix some of these complex problems that are plaguing our nation right now.
Well, a couple of the framers of the Constitution, I think, saw this coming. For example, if James Madison were alive today, he'd be pleading with us to trigger an Article 5. I truly believe that. George Mason, he'd be saying right about now, hey, I told you so. And Benjamin Franklin would be saying, sadly, I think with a lot of remorse, that his prediction in 1787, that the American people would eventually choose a despotic government, I think he'd be saying, sadly, it's become true. So in a sense, some of these founding fathers saw this coming. But on the other side of the coin, if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States, we're still going to need an Article 5 because of the limited powers of the presidency.
There is nobody, there's nobody that will be brought into Washington, D.C. that will take their own power away or limit the power of D.C. It's going to take the people outside of D.C. to limit that power. You're exactly right. Regardless of who gets elected, it is going to be up to the people to take it back. And remember, in Article 5, our founders all agreed unanimously. It's the only article that was put into the Constitution unanimously without any dissent. And the reason it was put in there was not to say what's going to happen, but to bring the states to the table in order to have the discussion, to decide what they want to propose for ratification. That is a huge bar to get over. It is completely safe, and it's the only answer that we have to what's happening in Washington, D.C.
And one more thing on Donald Trump. He's been ridiculed in the mainstream media, the Democrat-controlled mainstream media, for suggesting term limits on Congress. Well, if he's talking about doing this through an Article 5 convention of the states, I'm not sure he is, I'm not sure he isn't. But he's dead on, because this is probably, arguably, maybe more important than a balanced budget amendment, imposing term limits on these people in Washington, D.C., so they don't become these lifelong politicians draining our system and attacking our system.
Exactly. And more importantly, a lot of people believe term limits on the Supreme Court and reining in some of the super legislative activism that's happening on the Supreme Court. Yep. The Supreme Court is out of control, and term limits could also bring that much more in control.
And I think
the Founding Fathers knew this might happen. Article 5 of the Constitution gives the states the power to stop a runaway federal government, a convention of states to amend the Constitution. It's the only solution as big as the problem. It's time to stand up, speak up, and show up. Join us at conventionofstates.com.